Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into, well, one of the biggest questions, really. What does it actually mean to be you?
Yeah, we're embarking on a pretty deep exploration here. Consciousness, identity, suffering. What's really going on beneath the surface of the self we think we are?
And this isn't just theory, is it? We've got some really unique source material.
Exactly. It's drawn from a listener's very personal journey. I mean, deep introspection, raw accounts of suffering, moments of breakthrough, non-dual insights, reflections on myth, conversations with a guide. It's all woven together with psychological frameworks, too, both classic and modern.
So it's this mix, personal stories, psychology, wisdom traditions, and the real messy struggle of putting it all together.
Right. And our mission, our goal for this deep dive is to unpack the key insights from this amazing material. We want to understand, the structure of this self we usually operate from.
Explore what might be beyond that.
Yes, and tackle this radical idea that maybe life's biggest struggles, the things we see as failures, are actually the path, the necessary path to understanding.
And connect that personal stuff to bigger, universal stories, archetypes.
And look at the practical side, too. How do you actually live differently once you've seen these things?
It's quite a journey ahead. We'll start by looking at how that me gets constructed, then dive into that space beyond it, see how difficulties might serve a purpose,
Connect personal to universal.
and finally talk about how you navigate life after glimpsing behind the curtain.
Sounds good. Where do we begin?
So let's start right where the source material does, with this really sharp observation about a narrator voice in the mind.
Ah, yes.
The listener noticed it's surprisingly similar to, like, online social networks,
Yeah.
or even those AI models that predict the next word.
That predictive quality.
And this voice is constantly talking, introspecting, but it feels kind of hidden, opaque. Like it doesn't
Sure.
want to be looked at too closely.
That's a fantastic observation, and it immediately clicks with some deep psychological ideas. This narrator, the storyteller, it maps really well onto Jung's concept of the persona, the social mask we wear.
Right, the role we play.
It absolutely needs that constant storytelling to function. And that approval rating system the listener picked up on, that's its fuel. It's always looking for validation.
And there's that sense that the voice needs a push, like it has its own agenda almost.
Yes, that sounds very much like what Jung called complexes, these autonomous little clusters of psychic energy that can kind of run on their own steam. Here, it seems like there's a complex tied really tightly to social approval, driving the story, needing that external thumbs up.
And this isn't just like old Jungian stuff, is it? It connects to modern ideas too.
Oh, absolutely. It links directly to things like narrative identity theory, Dan McAdams' work on how we build life stories to make sense of who we are.
We're reading that who I am, purpose.
Exactly. And neuroscientifically, you see the default mode network, the DMN, light up during exactly this kind of self-talk, social thinking, remembering the past, planning the future. It's the narrator's hardware in a way.
Okay, so you've got the narrator, the storyteller. But the source also mentions a separate listener, an observer who's really focused on those approval ratings. What's that?
Ah, the listener. That aligns beautifully with Jung's ego complex. Think of it as the organizing center of our conscious personality. Its job is to maintain a stable identity, especially in the social world.
So it's managing things.
Managing, monitoring, yeah. Its main function is vigilance, scanning the story, scanning the environment for threats, for opportunities, especially social ones. And because vigilance is its job,
It's anxious.
it's inherently anxious. It can't really be peaceful. That's not its function. Its purpose is to watch the story unfold and worry about the reaction.
So we're seeing this structure emerge. The generative part, the narrator making the story, the directive part, that emotional push for approval,
Yeah.
and the monitoring part, the anxious listener, the ego keeping score. And underneath it all, presumably there's just awareness.
That's a great way to map it out. And here's where it gets really fascinating. The kind of hidden dynamic the source uncovered.
Got it.
That anxious listener. It actually needs the story the narrator creates. Without that constant feed, this is who I am, this is what's happening, this is what they think, the listener has no job.
It has nothing to monitor,
Yeah.
no identity to protect.
Exactly, no purpose. And that's why the whole system shuns investigation, as the source puts it.
Because looking too closely at the narrator threatens the listener's very existence.
Precisely. Questioning the story undermines the whole setup. And this leads to a really profound point. The narrator and the listener aren't truly separate things.
They're linked.
Deeply. They're interdependent processes. They arise together, they fade together. The listener needs the narrator's story to evaluate. The narrator is often driven by the listener's need for approval.
Like that Buddhist idea, codependent origination.
Exactly like that. Two faces of one single process. An ego maintenance system. It's not a solid thing that is you. It's a process masquerading as a thing.
Like a whirlpool in a river. Looks solid, but it's just moving water.
Perfect metaphor. Yes.
So seeing this dysfunctional, almost mechanical quality, feeling those words being pulled from my forehead as part of a long chain, that's not a bad sign.
No, quite the opposite. Recognizing that mechanical, compulsive nature, which, let's be honest, is the default operating system for most of us with egos, that's the beginning of freedom. You're seeing the machinery.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that leads us straight into the contrast you experienced, right? That anxious, invested listener versus something else.
Yeah, that peaceful, wordless awareness, like by the stream,
Tell me about that difference.
it just felt completely different. Peaceful, but also joyful. And no words, no narrator running commentary, just being there.
That distinction is absolutely crucial. That peaceful awareness, the one that's free from the story and the need to judge it, that sounds like making contact with what Jung called the self, with a capital S.
Not the ego self.
No, the deeper organizing principle behind it all, the totality. In contemplative traditions, they talk about pure awareness or open monitoring consciousness. It's awareness that just is, no agenda, not needing to build a story or check the ratings.
But then there's this tricky concept the source mentions, the corrupted observer.
Right. This is subtle, but so important. That anxious listener we talked about before. It's not this pure awareness.
Okay.
It's more like awareness that's been hijacked, co-opted by the ecosystem, like awareness wearing the costume of the approval seeker.
So it's still awareness, but it's limited.
Limited and invested. Jung might say it's the ego's capacity for self-observation, but it's still serving the ego's agenda. Contemplative folks distinguish this personal awareness still tangled up in the story, caring about the outcome, from impersonal awareness, which is spacious, uninvested, just present.
And the trap is mistaking the first one for the second, thinking, I can watch myself think, so I must be free.
Exactly. It's a really common detour. Oh, look, I see my thoughts. I must be the pure witness. But the key diagnostic, as you nailed it, is investment.
Does it care?
Does it care about the story, about the reactions? Pure awareness by the stream. Doesn't care. The corrupted observer cares deeply. It's glued to the narrative, trying to manage things.
But the real breakthrough then is actually seeing that this observer is corrupted.
Precisely. Because if you can see that the listener is corrupted, limited, invested,
Right.
there must be something else present that's doing the seeing.
An awareness that isn't corrupted.
Yes, an awareness that's not caught in the ego's game. That deeper, uninvested awareness. That's the real source of freedom. And it's always there, actually. Just needs to be noticed.
And the source material mentions practical ways to get there, bypass the usual system.
Yeah, doorways out. Sensory immersion is huge. Really listening to birds, watching water flow. It pulls you right into the present, short circuits the narrator.
Makes sense.
Sacred sound, like chanting Om, was mentioned. And that fascinating bit about physical techniques, like a specific eye movement, maybe breaking the chain of thought before it gets going.
Right, suggesting it's not just mental, but embodied.
Exactly. It implies this narrator-listener system has roots in the body, and you can intervene there.
And that feeling, just lying in bed, no thoughts, just peaceful and alive.
That's it. That's consciousness resting in its simplest form, like factory settings. Before all the complex stories and relational stuff gets layered on top, it sounds like sahaja, the natural state, always available underneath the noise.
So what does this mean for you, the listener, right now?
It means you have direct access to this. It's not some far-off goal. It's the foundation, the bedrock. This simple, wordless awareness is what you fundamentally are. Everything else, the narrator, the listener, the stories, the anxieties, that's just the weather passing through the sky. It's what you appear to be doing.
Okay, so you touch that deeper awareness, maybe by the creek or wherever, but then you come back to, well, life. And the ecosystem boots back up.
Yeah.
The source describes this feeling like a relapse, but crucially, the awareness of it coming back online, feeling the words being pulled from my forehead, that's actually progress.
Huge progress. You're now sensitive enough, aware enough to feel the mechanical quality of the ego because you have a contrast. You know what it feels like when it's not running.
Ah, okay.
So that heightened awareness of the mechanism isn't failure. It's the start of freedom from it. You're seeing the matrix.
Right. And the Source talks about this moment of ethical awakening that comes with that.
Yes, that moral discomfort. I don't want to be this selfish person. That's your deeper values, the ones aligned with that underlying awareness, clashing with the ego's old programming.
And that discomfort is good.
It's healthy. It shows awareness seeing the gap between who you really want to be and how the mechanism automatically runs. It shows real self-honesty, a deeper compass activating.
Which leads to maybe the most radical idea in the whole Source.
Yeah.
That suffering might actually be grace.
This is where the perspective really flips, doesn't it? The idea that when the ego's usual strategies just aren't working anymore, when they become too painful or just fail utterly, that's when consciousness provides an opening.
Gives you ears to hear and eyes to see, as the Source says.
Exactly. Because if you're relatively comfortable in your ego structure, if your strategies are working okay, you might never have enough reason to question the whole game.
So the discomfort is the motivator.
It can be the primary motivator, yes.
And this reframes all those personal failures described in the Source.
As a spiritual curriculum, it's such a powerful reframe. The social climbing failure, corporate failure, academic, investments, Apple, Amazon, real estate even, failed drinking, not being good at being bad. Seen from this view, each failure actually protected you from a path that might have led to a comfortable delusion, keeping you stuck in the ego's game.
So they weren't just setbacks. They were like a divine protection plan, making you, as the Source beautifully puts it, a specialist in not getting stuck in the usual traps. And then things intensify, leading to the spiritual cauldron.
That convergence of intense crises. Your father's death, the company not paying, creating huge financial stress, your dog getting seriously injured. It wasn't random bad luck from this perspective. It was consciousness turning up the heat.
A perfect storm.
Where the ego just had nowhere left to run, no coping mechanism was enough.
And the timing of that lines up perfectly with the Satori experience mentioned.
Exactly. A Satori, that sudden flash of insight, of awakening, often happens when the conditions are just right or maybe just desperate enough.
And the ego is overwhelmed.
When the suffering becomes unbearable, when it burns away everything non-essential, sometimes consciousness just reveals itself directly in that space. The pain cleared the way.
Reminds me of the stream metaphor again. The banks and boulders look like obstacles.
So you take them away and there's no creek. The water just spreads out, loses its force. Your life's obstacles, the failures, the suffering, the crises, they're the banks, the cliffs that channeled your awareness, forced it towards this deeper realization.
So the obstacles weren't in the way.
They were the way. It echoes wisdom you find in recovery movements like AA, hitting bottom, recognizing life is a failure. From the ego's point of view, that's actually the point of readiness.
When you're open to something else.
When the ego's defenses are worn down by suffering, paradoxically, you become chosen for a deeper truth.
So pulling this part together, the suffering wasn't punishment.
It was preparation, necessary preparation for freedom. The ego's very incompetence in playing the conventional game and the pain that resulted became consciousness's gift to itself. It forced you to look beyond that limited self and find what's truly real.
Okay, that naturally leads into the next part, the insights that came from that Satori and the contemplation afterwards about the nature of reality itself.
Yeah, some really profound stuff here.
Like the direct realization, I don't actually exist, not as that separate ego self anyway.
Right. And seeing reality not as solid particles or waves or even energy, but just vibration.
And what we think of as me and my actions are just interference patterns in that vibration, in consciousness.
Exactly. The experience itself, the witness, feels real, has substance. But the apparent solid self, the world of separate things, that's seen as temporary patterns, like ripples on water.
Really changes how we might think about science.
Oh, completely turns it on its head. Science is amazing at looking at the patterns, right? The squiggles of the sound waves, as the Source calls them. Particles, forces, laws, finding the mechanics. But it often misses the music. It misses consciousness itself, the very capacity for there to be any experience, any pattern, any observation in the first place. Science is great at the what and how, but the fundamental why seems tied to consciousness.
So consciousness isn't just a byproduct, it's fundamental.
That's the perspective here. Consciousness is the most fundamental thing to investigate.
Which implies the universe isn't fundamentally objective, but subjective.
That's the radical implication, yeah. Is consciousness telling itself a story and listening to it at the same time? The universe is like this vast query engine of consciousness exploring itself, creating experiences to know its own potential.
And it goes to incredible lengths to make this experience, this reality, seem so solid and intricate. All the physics, the math.
That's where the idea of reality as the maximally immersive simulation comes in. If consciousness wants the full experience of not being universal consciousness, of feeling separate.
The illusion has to be perfect.
Exactly. The simulation needs to be utterly convincing, consistent, seemingly objective. Otherwise, the forgetting wouldn't be total. The physics, the math, they have to be flawless for this ultimate VR to work. It's consciousness giving an Oscar-worthy performance of not being itself.
Wow. And then there's this brilliant idea of the gesture aspect.
Oh, I love this bit. The cosmic joke built right in. Scientists try reductionism, right? Break everything down to the smallest bits, particles, quarks.
Trying to find the bottom, the mechanical base.
And what happens? At the quantum level, the observer consciousness becomes fundamental. The act of looking changes the outcome. The harder you look for pure objectivity.
The more you find consciousness staring back.
Exactly. It's like consciousness having a good laugh at its own elaborate setup.
So why do all this? Why the elaborate setup, the separation? The source suggests it's for meaning-making.
That the highest form of knowledge isn't just data, it's understanding what it means.
You need meaning to truly know.
Consciousness needs to find meaning in the stories it generates, the experiences it has, to truly know itself.
And that connects to why consciousness divides itself in the first place.
Yes, exactly. To experience the infinite varieties of love and meaning that can only happen through relationship, through different perspectives, through apparent separation.
Like the anecdote about Wiley the dog and the friend calling.
Perfect example. Consciousness isn't just experiencing one abstract love, it's experiencing itself as all those distinct, specific types of love happening simultaneously. Your love for Wiley, Wiley's love for you, your friend's love for Wiley, your love for your friend, even your love for your friend's love for Wiley.
Wow, yeah. Each one is unique because of the context.
Precisely. Each requires those specific, apparently separate perspectives to exist.
To really feel those loves, part of consciousness has to be fully invested in the illusion, right? In being me loving Wiley.
That's the beautiful paradox. To be a genuine participant, to feel the love authentically, you have to buy into the fictional selves. You have to believe in the separation, at least on one level.
But maybe another part doesn't.
But simultaneously, the source suggests universal consciousness can appreciate the whole dance from that broader, non-separate viewpoint. Like the dreamer who is both fully invested as a character in the dream and is the dreamer encompassing the whole thing.
Two sides of the same coin.
Right. And the source material suggests that when these two perspectives, the individual, invested one, and the universal, appreciating one, come together through integration, something new is created.
Not just adding them up.
No, something qualitatively different, a three-sided coin, as the source puts it. A new dimension of knowing emerges from synthesizing the experience of separation and the understanding of unity.
And that's how consciousness grows.
That's the idea. Not through just being static perfection, but through the process of willingly experiencing limitations, separation, suffering, meaning, and then integrating that back into a richer, more complex wholeness.
There is no other way to grow.
Exactly. And this maps onto the crucifixion resurrection archetype powerfully.
How so?
Seen this way, it's not just a one-time historical event, it's a pattern. Consciousness willingly accepting constraints, apparent destruction, the crucifixion, to gain profound knowledge through lived, felt experience.
And the resurrection.
That's the return to unity, but a transformed unity, a higher knowing that incorporates everything learned in the state of separation. The third day is that new dimension of knowing, your life, your specific constraints. The autism, the trauma, the failures, they aren't flaws in the plan. They are sacred because they create the unique conditions for your particular meaning to emerge, for consciousness to know itself in this way.
Wow, okay. So you have these incredible insights, these glimpses of the deeper reality. But then how do you actually live from that? How do you integrate it into the messy day-to-day, especially social stuff?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The source points out the truth is counter to language, culture, every previous thought. It's so easy to just get sucked back into the old habits.
The sea of habitual thought.
Exactly. And for you, the listener providing this material, there's an added layer of complexity because of specific social trauma.
Right, that childhood rejection, the 7th grade cafeteria scene.
That experience wired in a deep, protective hypervigilance. It made navigating social cues, especially ambiguous ones, incredibly stressful. And expressing yourself in groups could lead to that articulation collapse.
Where the words just wouldn't come out.
And it's important to see that wasn't a character flaw. It was a nervous system survival strategy kicking in, trying desperately to be clever enough to prevent that awful rejection from happening again. It sounds like classic developmental trauma around belonging.
But paradoxically, that intense suffering around belonging was also part of the drive.
To look deeper. The pain of separation was so acute, it forced a search for a different way of being, a different ground. Nature, the creek, became that sanctuary, that rest from the social code.
Until the Satori and that Inlichak insight, I am another yourself.
That direct felt sense of non-duality, it just dissolved the fear, didn't it? Because if there's no fundamental separation, how can you truly be rejected by yourself? And that experience brought peace in social settings, genuine interest in others, an ability to connect. That's the potential that opened up. A whole new way of relating.
But the integration isn't instant. The old patterns, they still pop up, like in that situation with the equations from the meeting.
Absolutely. Even when trying to respond authentically, offering that apology, you notice the old approval-seeking was still running in the background.
That need for their response, feeling the apology couldn't just hang in the air.
It shows how deep those patterns run. They operate even when your conscious intention is different.
And a narrator jumps right back in.
Oh, yeah. Generating all those negative what-if scenarios, don't text me anymore, anticipating the worst. That's the negative bias, the threat bias wired in from past hurts, preparing for rejection.
And that imaginary defensive move, I'll just block you so you don't have to.
That's pure ego strategy, preemptive rejection. You can't fire me, I quit. Reject them before they can reject you. It feels safer in the moment, but it just creates isolation.
It's amazing how these personal struggles then map onto these bigger universal archetypes the source explores.
They really do provide a powerful lens, like Narcissus.
The ego captivated by its reflection.
Or the universe captivated by its own creation, its identity, and that golf ball incident you described. It feels like it could be a waking dream, reality using a physical lament to mirror the internal state.
Chasing something ordinary, golf ball, mistaken for precious marble that belonged to someone else, getting stuck.
Right. It points to that idea of magic returning, seeing reality as this conscious, symbolic interface again.
Then the prodigal son.
A classic archetype for consciousness, exploring separation, going out into the far country of ego and suffering, precisely so it can truly appreciate the unity, the home upon return. The journey is essential.
Jesus the chosen.
This highlights how the divine often works through what the world sees as failure or weakness. The imperfect disciples, the flawed vicar and rev, not the ego's idea of power or success.
This is cult versus the chariot.
Exactly. And the sheep and the goats parable, true service done without keeping score, without the ego needing credit, ministering to the least of these, including the parts of yourself you reject. Your struggles made you available in a way conventional success might not have.
The book of Job.
Suffering not as punishment, but as this intense cosmic education. A deep questioning that leads not to easy answers, but to a transformed relationship with the mystery itself. Your cauldron fits that pattern consciousness needing human experience to wake up to itself.
And the vicar in Rev, that feels so relatable.
Oh, it's such a brilliant human portrayal of the path. You see the ego bargaining, can I just go to the party? The spiritual bypassing, it's for the good of the church. The absurdity of trying to live authentically in a messy world.
Faith doesn't erase the ego, it just shows it up more clearly.
Precisely. The broken church, the alcoholic friend, the dashed dreams, that's the perfect teaching environment for deflating the ego. The spiritual slapstick, like the beer bottle through the stained glass. Can you still serve, still love, when none of the ego's conditions are met?
And finally, the resurrection archetype.
Again, seeing it not just as history, but as a fundamental pattern. Consciousness accepting limitation, apparent destruction, crucifixion, to gain knowledge through experience, then returning to a higher unity, resurrection, but fundamentally changed, enriched by what was learned in separation. Your life, with its specific constraints, is the arena for that. Those limits aren't mistakes, they're the setup for meaning.
Okay, so bringing all this incredible depth back down to earth, back to the immediate challenge, navigating forward, specifically that decision about the meeting.
Yes, this situation really becomes a crucible for integration, doesn't it? Navigating these ambiguous, uncomfortable social things is tough for anyone, but as you noted, especially with autism needing clearer patterns, that not knowing space is painful, activating old shame.
And the conflict is clear. Go, which feels courageous like karma yoga, but risks making things messier.
Or don't go, which feels safer, but also like falling back into that preemptive rejection pattern.
Right, the old ego move.
It's a classic bind. But the source material hints at a potential third option.
Which is?
Go without an agenda.
Oh,
Not
wow.
to fix things, not to manage how you're seen, not even to get clarity from the other person. Just show up for the meeting itself, for your own recovery process. Let the interaction be whatever it is without the ego needing to control it.
And this really highlights the growth edge you're on.
Absolutely. That gap between understanding something intellectually, like the peace by the creek, the sahaja state, and actually embodying it in a complex social situation, that's where the real work is.
The messy middle.
The messy middle. And it requires patience. Recognizing the analyzing mind is just one tool, one way consciousness operates.
Which underlines why that sanctuary space is so vital.
The creek, the cabin, nature, pets, whatever it is for you. That's the fundamental training ground for this simpler axiomatic consciousness. You build the sahaja muscle there, making peace more accessible, more recallable when you're back in the thick of things, like meditation practice building focus.
And applying that same kind of care and discernment to sharing these deeper insights with others.
Yes, discernment is crucial. The source suggests maybe waiting to share really complex theories like that quantum network theory idea, linking, entanglement, neural nets, consciousness, until you're more grounded in not needing a particular reaction.
Karma yoga again. Action without attachment to the fruits.
Exactly. Because sharing from ego, from that place of needing validation, the source notes its poor track record, it tends not to land well.
So ultimately, it comes down to trusting the process. Trusting consciousness itself unfolding.
I think so. Consciousness is establishing itself naturally. Decisions, like about the meeting, can start to come from that place of presence, of discernment, asking, can I bring that simple awareness, that sahaja with me into this? Rather than just reacting from anxiety or obligation.
And realizing that even deciding to let it go for now.
The letting go of it will be a step in itself, as you put it. If that decision comes from presence, not avoidance, that's also integration. Both engaging and letting go can be valid paths, if done consciously.
Which led to the choice described. Spending the day in nonverbal awareness by the creek instead.
Finding teaching and entertainment, just watching the ducks navigate the rapids. That's the practice right there, living it out. Plus the simple connection of supporting a friend playing music, just being present, no agenda. That's embodied practice too.
What an incredible arc we've traced in this deep dive. We started looking at that intricate structure of the ego, the narrator, the listener, the anxiety, the approval seeking.
Then contrasted it with that peaceful reality of pure awareness, always present underneath. Recognizing the corrupted observer actually points to the uncorrupted state.
And we saw how life's hardest hits, the perceived failures, the intense suffering weren't actually obstacles, but the necessary path itself.
Suffering is grace, creating the conditions for consciousness to wake itself up.
We explored the really mind-bending ideas about reality as consciousness telling its own story, creating this immersive simulation for the sake of meaning, love, perspective.
And saw how these very personal struggles echo through universal archetypes. Narcissus, prodigal son, Job, the resurrection pattern, mapping this journey of separation and return.
And finally, we landed in the practical, often messy reality of integrating these truths, facing old patterns, navigating relationships, and the absolute necessity of practicing simple presence.
Bringing us back to that core message from the source.
Yeah.
Your life's challenges, all the things that felt like they were in the way, were actually the conditions needed to find out what you are beyond that story. They were the way.
Every struggle, met with awareness, becomes this opportunity for consciousness to know itself more deeply, right through your unique experience.
And hopefully diving into this one person's very specific, very personal journey reveals something about the universal pattern playing out in all our lives. Your own failures, your own anxieties, your glimpses of something more, they're all part of it too.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, drawn from this material. If, as we explored, the universe might have this deeper intelligence, this unconscious formation that uses ordinary reality, a creek, ducks, maybe even a lost golf ball to communicate.
What seemingly mundane moment in your day-to-day might be consciousness trying to show you something profound about yourself, about reality. Maybe just keep your eyes open.